Tov. Today's daf yomi is Sotah daf Yud Tes Sotah 19. It says our Mishnah. We're going to start the third chapter. Hayunotelas minchasa mitoch kafifa mitris. He would take her offering, her grain offering, from the wicker basket vinosna b'toch kli sharis, and he would place it into the kli sharis. The kli sharis is the holy utensil that was used in the temple. So he would take her grain offering, which had been brought in the wicker basket, and he would put it into the kli sharis. Who is the one who would take it? So Rashi says the one who takes it and places it in the wicker basket and places it from the wicker basket into the kli sharis is the husband. That's what Rashi says. Habal, the husband, is the one who has this role. Because we said that the mitzvah of the Kohen, when does the Kohen start to do the mitzvah? Only from the point of the kamitza, only from the point of the scooping up of the flour. And the hagasha, the taking it close to the temple, to the altar. But the placing it in the kli sharas, that is, and Rashi explains the kiddush kli, the sanctification of the grain in the utensil, and the pouring of oil on it, and the mixing, which is not done here because here there's no oil in this case, but in general by a mincha, that is going to be kosher with a non-kohen. That is what Rashi says. Tosfos says the kohen takes it directly from the woman. The Kohen takes it directly from the woman. And so that's a fundamental dispute between Rashi and Tosfos as to the extent of the husband's involvement. So the Gemara says, so the Mishnah continues, you put this kli sharis on her hands, and the Kohen places his hand underneath her hand, umenifa, and he waves it. I was thinking also that this whole dispute, who is the one who gets involved, is really a question of, does the husband have a role in this grain offering? Is it the husband's or is it the wife's? Who's essentially on trial here? But that's for a deeper conversation. Heinif v'higish. So then the husband or the Kohen is going to wave the grain offering. V'higish. Then he brings it close to the mizbeach and touches the utensil to the altar. Kamatz. Then he scoops out some of the barley. V'hiktir. He then had placed the barley in a different utensil. He brings that utensil up the altar and he pours it onto the fire. V'ashar, and then the remaining part, which was not scooped up, nechal, that's called the shirayim, and that is nechal kohanim. Then the kohanim eat from this barley offering. Although I don't understand how they could have an appetite at this point, but it's called mashlam. They have to eat it. The kohanim are required to eat it. Let's say he would. So the Mishnah says that first he gives her these bitter waters to drink. And then afterwards, after he gives her the bitter waters to drink, he brings her grain offering. Rabbi Shimon Omer, makriv es minchasa, that first she brings the barley offering, and only afterwards does he give her the bitter waters to drink. What's the reason? It says afterwards he gives the bitter waters to the woman to drink. But even according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that you bring the grain offering and then she drinks, let's say he gave her to drink first and only then did she bring her grain offering, kishera, it would still be a valid ritual. So Amar le Rabbi Elazar le Rabbi Oshaya Didari. Rabbi Elazar said to Rabbi Oshaya of his generation, Why does it have to specify it's the Rabbi Yoshaya of his generation? Who else would he be speaking to? So Rashi says, Amorahu ubedora shal Rebbe Elazar ben Pedas, that he was an Amora and he was in the generation of Rebbe Elazar ben Pedas, and there was another Rabbi Yoshaya who was a Tana who Bar Plukta the Rabbi Yonasan B'Koi Gemara, who argues with Rabbi Yonasan and the rest of Shas. And what's the reason why he says to the Rabbi Yoshaya of his generation? Says Rashi, we don't want you to think that he's talking to Rabbi Yoshaya the elder, because it's not Orach Ara, it's not Derech Eretz to speak in the manner to somebody older like this. And you'll see what he's about to say. He says to Rabbi Yoshaya of his generation, he says, I don't want you to sit down until you explain this matter. What's the matter? How do we know that the grain offering of a sotah requires the waving? How do we know that the grain offering of the sotah requires waving? The Gemara says, Menoan, what do you mean? How do we know that there has to be the waving of this grain offering? Waving like we wave a lulav and etrog on sukkahs. What do you mean? How do we know? Vehinif ksivba. It says in the verse, Vehinif as hamincha, that he has to wave this mincha. The Gemara says, no, bebala minoan. How do we know that the one who brings the offering has to also wave it? That the owner, in this case, the woman. So as the Jerusalem Talmud makes very clear that we're talking about the woman is required to wave it. The Kohen places his hand under hers. And it's not going to, either he does it through a napkin or it's an older Kohen, or we're not concerned about negia, about touching, because it's just for a moment and it's in public and it's part of this ritual. So bebalami now, on asya yad yad mishlamim, we derive it from the karban shlamim. It states here, it says the Kohen shall take it from the hands of the woman. By the shlamim, it says his hands shall bring it. Makan Kohen, Afalon Kohen, just like here it has to be a Kohen who's involved in the waving. Also by the regular shlamim, it's a Kohen. And just like by the shlamim, the owner needs to be involved. So to here, how does he do it? So that the Kohen is supposed to place his hand under the hands of the owner and then wave it. The verse tells us, the Mishnah tells us, he waves the offering, brings it close, he scoops it up, and then it says, he first gives her the bitter waters to drink, and only then does he bring her grain offering. But the Gemara says, but the Mishnah has it backwards. At first, it talked about her bringing of the offering, and only now does it say to give her the water to drink. But she's already brought the mincha. Gemara explains, this is what our Mishnah means. Seder Menacha is Ketzad. What's the order of the carbon mincha? Heinif v'higish. What's the order of the mincha? Is you wave it, you bring it close, kamatz, you scoop it, hiktir, you burn the kamitza, v'ashar nechal kohanim. And then the rest is eaten by the kohanim. Ubashka gufa, but by giving her the bitter waters to drink, puigi Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan. That's where there's a dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan sabri mashkev achach makrev. The Rabbanan say first give her the bitter waters to drink, and then bring achach makrev es minchas, and then bring her grain offering. Rabbi Shimon savar makrev es minchas of achach mashkev. Rabbi Shimon says you bring her grain offering, and only then do you give her the bitter waters to drink. Shenemar v'achar yashke, as it states in the verse v'achar yashke. But even according to Rabbi Shimon, if she drank the bitter waters and only afterwards and only afterwards did he bring her a grain offering, is it kshera? Excuse me. So even according to Rabbi Shimon, if she first drank the bitter waters, it's kosher. The Gemara is going to delve deeper on top of 19b into this dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon. Again, the Rabbanon say first she drinks, then she brings the grain offering. Rabbi Shimon says first she's supposed to bring the grain offering and then she drinks. But if she had drunk first, it's still okay. The word vehishka appears 3 times in the passage of the Sotah. It says she drinks the bitter waters, then the grain offering, and then it says v'achar yashka, and then he gives her to drink, and then it says at the end also v'ishka esamayim. So 3 times it says that the Kohen gives her to drink. So that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Tan Rabbanan v'hishka. It says at the end of this passage of the Sotah, he gives her to drink. Matam omer v'alo kvar nemer v'hishka. It already says the word it gives her to drink. So it's coming to teach us that if the scroll of the Sotah was erased, and she says, I don't want to drink. After it was erased, we force her, we intimidate her, and we force her to drink against her will. That's the position of Rabbi Akiva. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, what does it mean? After the grain offering, he gives her to drink. But it says he already told her that he gave her a drink. After all of these acts that are discussed above, what acts? The grain offering. There are 3 essential acts Rabbi Shimon says you're supposed to do before you give her the bitter waters to drink. 1, first, the kometz has to be brought, the grain offering. Number 2, the scroll of the Sotah needs to be erased. And number 3, she needs to accept the oath. The Gemara is going to now analyze these 3 statements. What do you mean, Rabbi Shimon that she can't drink the bitter waters until the grain offering has been brought? Rabbi Shimon follows his logic. The Amar Makrav Minchasa v'achar kach mashke. That Rabbi Shimon says that he brings her grain offering and only then does he give her to drink. So the Gemara says, what do you mean she can't drink the bitter waters until the scroll is erased? Well, of course not. Elamai mashko, what is he giving her to drink? Of course she can't drink it until the bitter waters, the scroll is erased. That's what she's drinking. So the Gemara explains, that it means to say that everything needs to be erased. You can't even see it. You can't even see its roshem. The whole roshem, the whole imprint of the scroll has to be dissolved before she can drink it. It has to be complete erasure of the passage of the Sotah. There can't even be any aspect of God's name in it. And the third thing is achol tikabel hashvua mishta hudu shacha. So the third thing is she cannot drink it until she accepts the oath. So the Gemara says mishta hudu shacha. Okay, she can't drink it. Hamiltav ketivile, but everybody else can write it. Rava said specifically, you can't write the scroll until she accepted upon herself this oath. So the Gemara says, you're right, Kidei Nasba. It's true. We can't even write it, and for sure she can't drink it until she accepted the oath. The Gemara says, what's the nature of this dispute between the Rabbanon who say that ideally that Rabbanon say you'd give her to drink from bitter waters before the grain offering, and Rabbi Shimon who says ideally the grain offering is brought first, but if the bitter waters are drunk first, it's still okay b'di'evid, ex post facto. So what's the nature of their dispute? Gemara explains, Tuasa Krai Kasiva. There are, in fact, 3 times where it says the word Vehishka, that the Kohen gives her to drink. Vehishka Kama, there's the first Vehishka, Machar Yashka, the second one, and Vehishka Basra, and the third one. Rabbanan Savri Vehishka Kama Legufo. The Rabbanan say that the first time it says he gives her to drink, it's Legufo, it's to teach this fundamental idea. That first he gives her to drink, and then he brings her grain offering. And then the second one, it says that after the grain offering, and then he gives her to drink. This is to teach us this fundamental concept that the Roshem has to be completely gone. You can't have any Roshim. What does this mean that there can't even be any Roshim? There can't even be any black on the page, any black of the ink. That if you could see anything, for sure, if you could see the outline of the letter, it's no good. But you can't even see any remnants of the ink. It needs to be completely erased before she could drink it. A very powerful idea. And then, Shaka Basra, according to the Rabbanan, why does it say Vehishka at the end? That if the scroll was erased, Omeras, Any Sotah, and then she says, listen, I don't want to drink. We force her to drink against her will. Those are the three things according to the Rabbanan. One, first drink and then the grain offering. Number two, you can't have any Roshem left of the passage. And three is that, and the third thing is that if she says after it's erased, I don't want to drink it, we force her to drink against her will. Rabbi Shimon's of the position Achar Yashke Gufo, that the term Achar Yashke is to teach us Shemakar Ves Minchasa V'Achkaf Mashke. First she brings the grain offering, and then he gives her a drink. V'Shaka Kama, what is the V'Hishka Kama? The first V'Hishka that he gives her to drink is Shem Hishka V'Achkaf Chikr Ves Minchasa Ksher, that if he gave her to drink, and then he brought her grain offering, it is going to be Keshera. B'diavad, Rabbi Shimon says it's okay if she drank it before the grain offering. Vehishka Basra, on the last, he gave her to drink. Shem Nimchacha Megillah, this is like the Rabbanan, that if the scroll was erased, V'amra Any Shosa, and she says, I don't want to drink, Ma'ara no sa mashka no sa bal karcha. Then you force her to drink against her will. The Rabbanan Savar, the Rabbanan are of the position, B'diavad will pasach. The rabbis don't agree with Rabbi Shimon's reading. The rabbis say, the Torah wouldn't start its discussion by saying the Vehishka is B'diavad. That first case, which Rabbi Shimon says, tell us that if she drank and then brought the offering, it's still okay. The Rabbanan say we're not going to start the whole discussion with a B'diavad situation. And then the Gemara says, V'savar Rabbi Akiva, Mashkin Sabal Karcha. Does Rabbi Akiva really say we force her to drink against her will? Because we said on the top right, so Rabbi Akiva says that what do we do with the words Vehishka? It's to tell us that if she says, I don't want to drink it, the last Ishka is to tell us that if she says, I don't want to drink it, we force her against her will. And that's what Rabbi Akiva says. So the Gemara is challenging that. The Sever Rabbi Akiva, does Rabbi Akiva really say that if she says, after it's erased, I don't want to drink it, we force her to drink it against her will? But we have an opposite price. But Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kolbo Shal Barzel, Matilin Lotopia, a horrific scene. That we put a metal instrument into her mouth. Why? Because if the scroll had been erased, we force her to drink against her will. Here, the opinion that Rabbi Akiva said above, here is attributed to Rabbi Yehuda. I'm Rabbi Akiva, but now Rabbi Akiva, in contradiction to the first opinion of Rabbi Akiva, says, what's the only purpose of the bitter waters is to check her, to tell us whether or not she was really adulterous. But for the fact that she's now refusing to drink the water, it proves she was guilty. And so we don't need to give her the bitter waters. So we have this contradiction between Rabbi Akiva and the Brisa. It says, the first Brisa says we force her to drink the bitter waters, and Rabbi Akiva here. So Rabbi Akiva, the Brisa concludes, Ella Achlo Karavakometz, the Brisa concludes it's opaque, and we're going to need to analyze this conclusion of the Brisa. But the Brisa concludes, Ella Achlo Karavakometz Yechol Alsabra. Until the kometz is brought, she can recant. Mishikaravakometz in Yechol Alsabra. Once the kometz was brought, she cannot recant. So the Gemara says, first of all, so you want to say that Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion now that we don't force her to drink against her will, because when she rejects the drinking, we see that her true colors and we know she's guilty. Well, if that's the case, so the Gemara says, according to your logic, the price itself is contradictory. because Mishikarva Kometz Any Chol Achsarba. Why does Rabbi Akiva not allow her to? Why does he force her to drink once the kometz was brought? Don't we now see her true colors that she's refusing to drink? So she's obviously guilty. So the Gemara says no. Well, kasha hadika hadraba machmas resisa v'hadika hadraba machmas perusa. There's the differences between the two brises. The one brise is saying that Rabbi Akiva says we force her to drink. That's where we see that suddenly she's afraid of the bitter water. She's getting scared, like afraid of heights. It doesn't necessarily mean she's guilty. Well, then once the scroll is erased, we're not going to let her just be afraid and not drink, but we force her to drink. But if she was kahadraba machmas priyusa, but if she is recanting and she doesn't want to drink, but we see that the whole time she wasn't afraid. She was strong, and it's just that she didn't think they'd ever force her to drink the bitter waters. But now she realizes that her time's up, and she's going to be exposed as a adulteress, so then we force her to drink it. And this is what our Bryce is saying. Kol machmas priyusa is what Rabbi Akiva is saying in the end, in the second Bryce. Anything where she's trying to change it, as a result, she wasn't afraid, let's say, just of the bitter waters, but she's afraid that they were going to work, and because she was a sinner, kol machmas priyusa kal lo shatya. Anything that's from Briusa, meaning to say we can tell that she's arrogant still, so then we're not going to give her to drink. But Machmas Risisa, but if it was because she was just afraid of their efficacy, she was afraid of the power of drinking, going through this ritual, then Achla Kometz, but Machmas Rasisa, Achla Karva Kometz. Then until the kometz, the grain offering was brought to Akatilo Imchot Megillah. According to Rabbi Shimon, the scroll has not yet been erased. Or Inami Imchot Megillah Tishalokadin Avid Kohanim. Or if the scroll had been erased, Bidi Avid, like Rabbi Shimon says, before the grain offering. To Maki, it was erased. Matzi Hadraba. But before the grain offering, she could recant. Mishikarva Kometz, but once the Kometz was actually brought, the Bedin of the Kohanim de Machki, because the Kohanim then acted properly in erasing it, Lo Matzi Hadraba. Then Rabbi Akiva says, we're not going to allow her to recant at that point. So the Gemara says, so now we see Kasha de Rabbi Akiva. There's a contradiction between Rabbi Akiva in the two braisos, because Hasam Amar Mechika Ma'akva, Acha Amar Kometz Ma'akva. We have another contradiction in the first braisa. Rabbi Akiva is saying that once it was erased, we force her to drink, and here we're saying once the kometz was brought, we force her to drink. So it's a contradiction within Rabbi Akiva. We're on top of Chaf Amar Aleph. So the Gemara explains. Trei Tanaya Liba de Rabbi Akiva. It's really two Tanayim arguing about what Rabbi Akiva says. Is it based upon when do we force her to drink? Obviously, everybody says it's when it's Priyusa. We could tell she's arrogant. But one opinion is only after the bitter waters have been erased, and the other opinion is even after just the grain offering has been brought, even before the bitter waters are erased. The Gemara says, so now the Gemara asks the question. Let's say she says, Eini, Amra, Eini Shosem Machmas Priyusa. She says, I'm not going to drink. And we could tell she was arrogant. So which means to say with them, when she says she's not going to drink because she's arrogant, we're saying she's guilty, she's Beduka Vomedes. The Chazra of Amra, but now she wants to change her mind, and she says, Shosani, I do want to drink. Mao, do we say Kivin the Amri Aini Shoseh? Tmeani Kamra. Now do we say that since she had said initially, I don't want to drink, she was in effect saying she's Tmeya. The Kivin the Ilsek Navsha Betuma, and so since she established herself in a state of ritual purity, well, Matzis Hadraba, she's not able to recant. Odelma, Kivin the Amra, not ritual impurity, a state of sin. Tmeya here means sin. Or perhaps Kivin the Amra Shosani, or perhaps since she says, I do want to drink. Now, Galia Daita, the mach must be Asusa Udamra. When we thought she was acting out of arrogance, really it was out of fear. So therefore, now that she says I want to drink, we see that initially she had said it out of fear. So Teku. The Gemara says, we'll leave this question unresolved. And Amar Avua Dishmuel, the father of Shmuel says, Chach she'itein mar l'toch hamayim. In addition to the waters being bitter from the scroll erasing in it, you actually have to make them physically bitter by placing bitterness into the water. My time, what's the reasoning? The Amar Kra Mei Amarim. It says that you place the scroll b'sefer umacha al Mei Amarim. You place the scroll and you erase it into the bitter waters, which means Shemarim Kvar, the waters have to have already been bitter. All right, we will. If anybody has any question, I'm happy to address, and we'll stop here with the daf.